Hello and welcome to the second episode of Awkward Sibling Hug. I'm your host Phineas.
And I'm Sarah.
And you're watching Disney Channel. Except not really. It's just a podcast about a show that was on the Disney Channel, at least at this time, before they shoved it to Disney XD. That's such an era. Like, did you watch the show legally when it was coming out? Did you also have Disney XD?
I did, yeah. I would record episodes on my parents' DVR.
Oh, totally. No, I watched the show as much live as I possibly could, because the whole thing was, I don't know if you remember, but, I remember my YouTube channel at the time, the whole shtick was I released, a vlog the minute an episode came out. That was an era, distinct era, you know?
Wow. Just, immediate commentary, afterthoughts.
I did it for
which is totally different from what we're doing now.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, but the whole thing is this is conversational and much more planned out, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Even its own little ways. Huh?
Oh my god. Now that I'm thinking about it, I watched season 1 by recording episodes onto my parents' DVR, and then I think I did some pirate-ish activity during season 2.
I mean, that's understandable. I mean, the whole thing with the show is at least you weren't affecting anything with it, because it's Alex knew season 2 would be the last season, and it's good to give it viewership, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, it's piracy it's so weird, right? I've got such a complicated relationship with it, because I understand it if you can't watch it in any other way. But I'm also a film major, so I kind of have to be against it, because when people pirate things, I lose money. So I kind of have that moral obligation, you know?
Yeah, and it's if I had any other way of watching it at the time, I would have. It was just truly... I can't remember. I think around season 2 was when my parents stopped paying for live TV, and we just switched right over to streaming, and I had no way of seeing it otherwise, unless I went on to one of those silly little live streams that fans would put together.
Well, so it's so funny when you think about it, because it's hang on. Yeah, it's a very yawning episode on the Phineas side of things. But so, no, I think the whole thing within piracy for shows, right? It's I think for me, I think the biggest thing with the show is the conversation around it, right? That's the most important thing in any TV show, in my opinion. Doesn't matter what you're getting for actual ratings. If people are talking about it in, an adequate way that matters, that's what kind of, matters in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
And for...
having that community.
Exactly, because the way that I view it, right? Fans breed more fans, but not in the sexual way. They breed them in the whole interest catching on stuff thing. Because that, we literally have sites like Tumblr exist as little incubators for fans of shows.
Oh my god, yeah, that really was at the height of Tumblr fandom.
It's crazy to me because it's I think Gravity Falls is a unique beast, and compared to even other cartoons from the era, where it's I feel Steven Universe and Gravity Falls are kind of two unique beasts, because it's I think Adventure Time was also really popular and stuff, but I always viewed Gravity Falls and Steven Universe to be kind of this similar wave and stuff, because they came out 1 year apart, and they told kind of similar storylines, or not similar storylines, but similar audiences. I think they targeted. Definitely both shows that are queer awakenings for kids.
That was a very interesting era of animation.
It really was.
That was yeah.
The fact that the only show that survives from that era is Teen Titans Go is so funny.
Is that show still going on?
Yeah, that show is still going on. They are making new episodes to this day. No idea.
What season are they on?
Let me look that up. Hi guys, this is a Gravity Falls podcast, but we're looking at what season Teen Titans Go is on, because that's just how things go.
That's so funny, because that was the one show that everybody in the nerdy teenagers who are still into cartoons that was the one show that everybody kind of collectively disliked.
Okay,
if I remember correctly.
No, you are very correct. There's 8 seasons of Teen Titans Go now, but no, that show was like the most hated show in like the cartoon community. I think like ever when it was coming out.
Which like, okay, I haven't seen that much Teen Titans Go, so I feel like I'm not even like qualified to say anything about it. But from what I have seen, it's like the hate was a little undeserved. Like, I totally understand why our general communities didn't really like it, because it's definitely designed for like really, really young children, and there's nothing about it that's appealing to an older audience.
Oh, totally.
Which, like, there's, that's frustrating as a person who's part of an older audience, but like, there's also nothing wrong with that. It's on Cartoon Network.
Oh
like,
yeah, no, absolutely.
These are made for kids.
Well, it's weird.
The fact that shows like Gravity Falls and Adventure Time had stuff that adults could enjoy, that's more of a like delightful bonus thing than anything.
Well, it's definitely weird and stuff, because it's like we have this unique era, and it's the whole I don't know about you, but there's that always distinction between like a kid's show and an adult's show, that like when you're around this age, you're like really trying to walk and stuff. Like, so when Gravity Falls first came out, right, I was canonically, aka in real life, 10, right? So at the age of 10, it's so interesting because there's a lot of kids in my age who are watching shows that I was not allowed to watch at that time. It was this awkward middle child era where it's like my parents would be like, "Oh wow, this show's like such for kids," of like certain kids shows, and then when I'm trying to watch an adult show, they're like, "Oh, that show comes at 9 p.m. That's not made for you." Shout out to the Goldbergs, which was a show that took me a while to get to watch with my family, because they were like, "Oh, it's a 9 p.m. show. That's not for kids." Like my parents knew anything about media literacy. Love you guys, but like media.
I've seen episodes of Full House airing at 9 p.m.
Right.
Tell me that's not made for kids.
No.
Tell me that's not made for young people.
I've actually never watched Full House once in my life.
Really?
Yeah, I've gone without that show.
That show was like a mainstay when I was a kid. That was like in my little collective of sitcoms that we were watching. Full House. But actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I was about to say like MASH and Frasier, and those aren't really for kids.
No.
MASH is about the Vietnam War. Frasier is about pretentious old men being pretentious old men.
So, shout out to my good friend Nick at the break room at where he's working. There's a bunch of old people who are always watching MASH, and I think that's really funny.
It's such a good show. I've spent one summer, one of my high school summers, damn it, just binging MASH.
Yeah,
that's just what I did.
Well, I mean, like we always. Hey, everyone spends a high school summer here now binging mashed potatoes. Okay, I'm so sorry. That was a really bad joke.
That's a good joke for me, because I have spent a summer vacation eating inordinate amounts of mashed potatoes. So that you've reached the right audience, my friend.
Okay, cool. I want to double check, because you never know for sure how things go like that. But no, it's like, it's really crazy to me, because it's like, I feel like fandom culture and stuff really takes over when you're like younger and stuff. And I think it's really funny, because it's like, I feel like it's so funny, because I feel like the show is kind of a fake Gravity Falls podcast, by the way. Like, it's really just talking about fandom culture of the 2010s and how much things have changed in the age of streaming with these young whippersnappers who can just watch everything of a show when it binge releases. But like, dude, we had it so much better back then. Like, that whole discussion has been lost nowadays. Like, when you release a binge show, right, you watch the whole thing in one sitting, and then you forget about it like 2 weeks after. The whole thing with shows that come out weekly is you're gonna remember them a lot longer.
Oh my god, yeah, you have all that time to discuss. And like, it is kind of frustrating at the time. God knows I remember how frustrating it was waiting during those Gravity Falls hiatuses, but at the same time, that experience of getting to make all of those YouTube videos speculating about which fan theories were right and which ones were wrong, and I made an entire YouTube video just talking about the DVD releases they had at the time, and just like, is it worth buying these? I wouldn't have thought to do that if it was just like I just binged the entire show all at once. Like, my YouTube channel wouldn't exist. My whole, like, creative starting point wouldn't exist if it hadn't been for the fact that Gravity Falls was live.
Oh, totally. Wait, hang on. I'm trying to readjust my volume. See, this is a funny podcast because I'm, like, always editing things live. Okay, yeah. No, so one of the episodes that I really want to do of this podcast, like, later down the line is going through a bunch of the old theories. I think once we finish with season 1, I'd love to do that. Like, because...
That would be so fun.
Because the way that this works, so for new viewers who are, like, tuning in, well, this is the first time explaining it. The way that we're going to be doing this is hopefully we're releasing this once weekly and going through all the episodes in the first season and then going on basically a once-a-month basis for a little while until we get to season 2 eventually. Because, again, your favorite content creators... us, naturally, need breaks now and then, because it's like, you can't just throw, weekly podcasts are a lot of work. It's a lot of chaos inside, you know?
It's a time commitment. It's more of a time commitment than you think it'll be. Well, and we're both pretty busy people. I know that I've got, like, when I'm not working full-time during the summer, I'm going to film school and then also still working a day job.
No,
it's like,
I'm going to, like, film school as well. Shocker, I know. And then also it's like I have a day job that I'm starting up at the end of this week. And then also I have a bunch of other projects, like my other podcast that I run, and then other YouTube videos that I make, and then other things that just exist for some reason. So this is actually one of the more relaxed projects that I run, to be honest. Like, it's very chill. It's the only podcast that I've ever done that's with the same person every single episode.
Yeah, and it's like we would be having similar conversations, even if it wasn't for entertainment purposes.
Right.
Even if it was for making capital C content.
I mean, we've kind of been doing what we've been doing since we were, like, kids and in middle school. This is just us doing it with film school experience and more as adults. Like, I could legally drink if I want, but I don't, and it's really funny to me. Dude, I'm trying to I feel like Dipper is the kind of person who would be so anxious at parties.
He is the kind of person who's spoiler alert. There's an episode coming up about how anxious he gets at parties.
I forget things because I'm a silly goober. But anyways, on to the episode that we actually watched. Legend of the Gobblewonker.
Legend of the Gobblewonker. This is the second episode, and it's so good. I know there are people out there who would be like, Legend of the Gobblewonker, it's one of the lower tier Gravity Falls episodes. And to those people, I say, yes, this episode is slightly less of a masterpiece than the pilot was, but it's still so funny.
I mean,
it's so good.
I prefer the comedy. Like, I think Tourist Trapped is a very funny episode, but I think this is a funnier episode. Tourist Trap just, like, gets everything going with the plot and stuff. Gobblewonker, much more, I feel like, is the supplemental, where it's like you're seeing them fiddle around with these characters for the first time. Because this is, like, Seuss's first, like, major episode where he has stuff to do. And then, like, Stan's subplot is, like, so funny. Because, like, Stan doesn't even get too much in Tourist Trap. Tourist Trap is, like, establishing that central Dipper-Mabel dynamic. And then Legend of the Gobblewonker is, like, introducing how Stan and Seuss play into things and how they're going to continue to play for the rest of the series more so. Because we're still really in the establishing pieces of the series, right? Where the first few episodes line up, like, key dynamics that are going to play out as the key pieces to the puzzle for the rest of the show's run. And I respect it so much for that. Like, this is one of the funniest episodes that I've seen. It's the funniest of the 2 episodes that I've seen so far for this. I don't know about you, but, like, I was laughing constantly through this one.
Oh my god, yeah. I mean, when you really think about it, because the pilot episode has so much that it has to do. It has to introduce all the characters. Right. It has to introduce everything. The main sort of overarching mystery, the tone, everything. Right. But this episode, truly, when you get down to it, it doesn't have to do all of that. And when you look at the plot, it's not a lot actually happens. Like, truly, it's just they go out to a lake, and Dipper and Mabel are like, hey, instead of hanging out with you, Grunkle Stan, on your silly little ramshackle boat, we want to go with Seuss and hunt a monster. And we're going to bring a bunch of disposable cameras and we're going to try to catch a picture of it. And then it's just them going out and goofing off until they find it. And then they get chased by it for like 5 minutes. And that's the entire episode.
And it's the thing, too, though, I think, is it's so key with these dynamics. Like, when we talk about, like, Tourist Trap, right? A lot of the whole thing, I feel like Tourist Trap really feels like a Dipper episode. Like, Mabel's important to it, but she doesn't get as much to do with it. And this one, I feel like they're a lot more equalized within the plot of what they're doing and stuff. Co-working, while the last one's like Dipper's whole thing of is Mabel's boyfriend a vampire? And no, gnome, actually. He is not a vampire. He is gnome. He is not a vampire.
He's a bunch of gnomes in a trench coat, literally.
Exactly. Muppet Man style. And it's so great, honestly.
It's so funny. It's such a funny reveal.
But it's like, it's really great to see them interacting on a sort of like a similar goal, like different end goals within the money. Like Dipper wants to be this famous adventure boy, like Dipper Anna Jones, like they've like even got that like parody costume for him, and then Mabel just wants to use a hamster wheel, which is like, it's so funny. Mabel is the perfect. We joked about this while we were watching it, but like Mabel and Dipper are both like perfect parts of the whole ADHD hyper focus and hyperactivity thing. I love these characters.
They're very much two halves of the same whole.
Oh yeah,
they're very, and it's really fun because this episode doesn't have a lot to do, like, character-wise, but I feel like it really does so seamlessly establish Dipper and Mabel's dynamic really well. In a way, like, if you missed the pilot episode, you're missing a lot of context about like what the show is about overall. But this episode gives you the context you need to just get started, to just jump right in, which is
exactly.
This is a show about two twins who are really weird and just total nerds, and they're very different people, but they're twins and they're best friends, and you enjoy watching them go on these weird mystery hunts together. You enjoy watching them do weird shit together.
Well, when you think about it, right, so it's like when you're analyzing in the grand scheme of how cartoons like make their main duos and stuff, I feel like Disney's lead duos are always a little more on the same page than the other things. Like, when you compare this to, like, say, Regular Show or something, right, where Mordecai and Rigby kind of, like, are fighting often, it feels like. But the Disney shows, like, Gravity Falls, they're always, they really care about each other, which is really cool. I think it's really cool that Alex Hirsch adapted the fact that he was a twin into this, very much so. And then...
really tell.
And then also, it's like, because it feels so realistic for siblings, instead of being these, like, fake ones that get along either too much or too little. It's kind of that, like, just right point where they are the perfect counterbalances to each other and stuff in every bit of their characterization. And I love watching the dynamic play out and stuff, and also the comparability, or, like, I love Seuss as, like, the third person in this trifecta and stuff, and how he's basically just another kid, but in a grown man's body.
Oh my god, when they get to Scuttlebutt Island, and he puts his arm over their scuttle part, and he goes, heh, Butt Island.
No,
it shouldn't be as funny as it is, but it's so funny.
And it's the whole thing where it's, like, the thing with Gravity Falls, right, is it's, like, I'm the kind of person where I think I've got a more dignified sense of humor when it comes to watching things. Where it's like, I'm not going to go like, but funny. But it's like, the thing with Gravity Falls that's so brilliant about its comedy, I feel like it mixes so many styles, where it keeps you so on your toes, and you never know what they're going to really go with next. Also, I freaking love how mean-spirited this show sometimes is, like, with its jokes and stuff. Or not mean-spirited, but, like, just dark randomly. Like, I think the entire Grunkle Stan subplot in this episode's hilarious. Watching him try to, like, since he's not having a good time, he just decides to ruin everyone else's time.
Oh my god. The part where he goes up to that one couple
I
Right as the guy is about to propose on his little boat, and he drives up and he's like, "Hey, you want to hear a joke?
I know.
My wife still misses me, but her aim is getting better."
It's so
and neither
great.
of them are laughing. And he's just like, it's funny because marriage is terrible.
I know.
He drives away angrily. It's just so. I'm doing that joke such a disservice. It's so funny. It's so funny when he does it.
Does Stan ever say something about an ex-wife? Is that ever mentioned in the show?
I don't know. Like, it's one of those things where I think in the general fan community, people have kind of decided that he has an ex-wife just based off of that one joke.
I mean, between that
like,
and then his general personality. He has
What?
divorced man energy, if it makes sense.
He does, and that's the thing, is he's got that like grungy ass tank top, and he's always in his underwear, and he's always saying weird stuff, and it's like, yeah,
Yeah,
you were someone's mistake.
It's
somewhere along the line.
No, honestly, that would be so funny. If there's like some canonically written first date for Stan or something that he had, because I really see this man being the kind of person who's just so much like, he's so much himself, and so like, the whole thing that I love about Stan is it's like he's got those insecurities, but he's just so himself like all the time and stuff too, which is just so authentic to older people of like his age and stuff. Oh my gosh.
He has stopped giving a shit. If he ever gave a shit, he stopped giving a shit by this point. He's just doing his thing, no matter how gross and weird it might be.
I know.
I kind of admire that.
I think it too. Level. It's so sweet. It's so yeah. Also, one of my favorite parts is I love how he goes up to the two children and their uncle like celebrating, and they just like rub it into his face that like that Dipper and Mabel like left him with. They had like those suspiciously similar characters, being like, maybe no one loves him, and it's like, aww.
Oh my god. Schmipper and Schmabel, I think is what those characters are called in the credits.
That's hilarious.
And they're Pop.
Oh yeah.
When I was listening to the commentary, they were talking about how they were trying to create the most like sappy, saccharine Disney version of the characters, and they thought it was funny that that the idea that Grunkle Stan would just be so like horrified and just like put off by this saccharine Disney-fied version of his life. Well, it was just like, yeah. And that's I think where a lot of the humor comes from in this show.
Yeah.
It's just that this show is so aware that it's a Disney cartoon, and it does not feel great about that. It's not super excited about being Mickey Mouse approved.
We took a break while we were watching the episode to rewatch the Alex Hirsch standards and practice emails, which are the fun. By the way, the single funniest like things ever and stuff, because what he put up with at Disney as he was making this show is so wild that was like legal, that was like made for someone to deal with, and what they had an issue with, like they were like, Seuss cannot dress up like a dog because that would get into people who have this furry thing, and it's like, oh my gosh, like that's one of their whole things, or the whole basketball player and the chimp thing.
Oh my god. Salacious monk. Salacious is a inappropriate term, and it's like, oh my god. For the uninitiated, what we're talking about here, that S&P video, is basically Alex Hirsch, the creator of the show, at one point published a video to his like Twitter account or something.
Yeah, for the 10th anniversary last year.
Yeah, oh yeah, it was for the 10th anniversary.
Yeah.
Basically, he released him doing a dramatic reading of some of the emails that he exchanged with the Disney Standards and Practices department, which is basically just like the Disney censors that you have to like send your scripts to get them to approve, to make sure it's like child friendly. And it's such a good video. If you've never seen it, just go look up Gravity Falls S&P. It's so funny. It's just like the funniest 5 minutes. Some of the stuff that they thought would be potentially inappropriate is just so bizarre.
One of my favorite ones is, please revise where you say Lucifer. And he's like, the devil's not real.
The devil's not real. I'm not revising this.
No. And
he would absolutely complain about that as somebody who grew up in the types of communities who made themselves into like chronic complainers of Disney's engaging in demonic activity. That is absolutely something they would have gotten on Disney's asses about. People made entire websites about how this show was secretly run by the Illuminati and by Satan worshippers. Like, I guess their worries weren't completely unfounded in a way.
So the funny thing for me, right, it's like, so as someone where it's like, I don't deal with, like, hyperfixations as much anymore, right, but, like, when I was in middle school, that was an element of ADHD that I had a lot of, and Gravity Falls was definitely a hyperfixation, so I talked about it in my 7th grade class a lot, and so one of the kids that was really bad, and I'm gonna name his first name because I don't care, and is he gonna be watching a podcast of mine? His name's like Donald, right? And Donald I always have negative connotations to that name now. I blame the president. But so he was always like, the show's Illuminati, so it's bad. And then everyone in the class agreed because that was just middle school. But
it's actually plot twist. The show is good because it's Illuminati. The show is made by the Illuminati, and that makes it better.
Exactly.
That makes it even better.
Did you hear that?
It would not be what it is without the Illuminati.
Did you hear that Bill Cipher appeared on The Simpsons?
Really?
They included him, I think, once in a Treehouse of Horror. But, no. Going back around to this episode, right? Also, this episode gives, like, so many of the extended town characters, like, their first real deal appearances and stuff. Like, this is our first time seeing, Old Man McGucket doing his Old Man McGucket thing.
Yeah, this is the introduction of Old Man McGucket, which he ends up becoming a major player, which I don't think they initially...
He's the author of the journals.
Haha!
Don't worry, we'll get to that later on. We'll get to that at another point, that discussion.
Spoiler, but also not really a spoiler.
Yeah. I kind of think with these episodes, right, that, like, I'm pretty sure most of the audience has watched this show. Like, there's no point of watching a rewatch podcast, like, if it's your first watch. It's a rewatch podcast. I don't know. But
yeah, if you haven't seen the show yet and you're watching a rewatch podcast about it, that's on you, man. If you get spoiled on stuff you don't want to get spoiled on, sorry, bro. Right. That's your bad.
Well, and the thing too with Gravity Falls is it's such a mainstream show. Like, it's never left the mainstream as far as I'm thinking. Like, even now that it's like off the air, it's still like as popular as it was when it was airing and stuff. I really like. It's
just in terms of
and it's not going away.
It's very popular, and I can't tell if it's. Like, I know it's mainstream, quote unquote. I can't tell if it's just like really, really popular within animation communities and with animation nerds, or if it's like genuinely. But if Bill Cipher's making appearances on The Simpsons, I think this might be a big deal of a show.
Well, so the other thing that I'm thinking with it, right, like within the animation community, right, I think the golden goose show of Western animation is like Avatar, right? I think Gravity Falls is very, very close to it as far as like quality wise and stuff. In a lot of like, I think it's like Gravity Falls. I think like I rarely saw anyone complaining about the show aside from like Watch Mojo, which did put it on their list ranking of the worst Disney cartoons. Fun fact, there they had to apologize for that. But like
because there was such an intense backlash.
Well, the whole thing with our whole list.
So funny.
The whole thing
those
with
lists are voted by their fans,
right?
And I think there was just a lot of Watch Mojo fans who just really had some sort of weird vendetta against Gravity Falls. I imagine it's probably some people from the whole "it's a demonic show that's trying to eat your kids" crowd.
Right. No, they complained like their things with that Watch Mojo was doing where they were like knocking the quality was they're like, this show is really dark, and it's like, yeah, it's Gravity Falls. What were you expecting, my friend? Lovingly.
It's not even that dark.
Right.
Like for a kids show, it can get a little like it's scary. It's scary as far as children's go.
I think it's still like the darkest Disney cartoon, but like there's no real competition in there because like Disney cartoons
that's a low
aren't
bar.
Dark as far as it goes. Like we got the Owl House nowadays that from what I've not watched all of it. Don't spoil if you have. From what I gathered, it has gotten kind of dark at points. But then you compare that to, like, what was on at the time, right? Where the shows that I remember being Gravity Falls, like, companions as it was coming out was, like, Phineas and Ferb was still on the air at that point. Which, iconic show, honestly, but not dark at all. It's one of those wholesome shows, like, ever.
Yeah.
And then there was also like, you go.
Sorry, yeah, I'm thinking about the time with Gravity Falls. I think the other big Disney Channel cartoons were Star versus the Forces of Evil, Wander Over Yonder, and then Phineas and Ferb.
Yeah,
I think
no,
the
and
big hitters.
there's like nothing within that. Hang on, I'm trying to look this up as we're going through this.
But I feel like Gravity Falls isn't like dark necessarily because it's a very comedic show, and it has a very like it's not saccharine, but it has a
Right.
very big heart at the end of the day. It's
Yeah.
very much a story about two 12-year-old siblings who are sort of like they're right there. They're 12 years old. They're going from childhood to teenagerhood.
Yep.
And that it's sort of about their relationship and how they, how they relate to each other as they're making that transition.
Oh, absolutely.
While also being surrounded by all of this crazy, the weirdness of Gravity Falls. And it's like, I don't think of Gravity Falls as dark in the same way that I don't think of the Haunted Mansion ride at Disneyland as dark. It's like, it's spooky. It's spooky, but it's not dark.
Okay, so like also, so Gravity Falls was coming out right at a time where Disney wasn't really doing a lot of cartoons. Like, so the cartoon that came out before Gravity Falls did in the chronological order for the channel was Fish Hooks, which was garbage. I'd never really watched that show.
Oh, I forgot about Fish Hooks.
And then after that, over a year later, Wander Over Yonder came out, which is the closest one like in length because it ended the same 2016 year. Again, I feel like Star Versus is kind of in a second wave after Gravity Falls, more so because it came out in 2015 as the show was like nearing it to its end and stuff. But yeah, so when you think about the Disney shows that were coming out around it, it's definitely in a weird position, I think.
There just wasn't a lot like it at the time. It was very much it was very unique.
Okay, I found
coming out.
I found the actual Disney show that released the closest to Gravity Falls. Want to know what it is? This might surprise you.
What?
It's Dog with a Freaking Blog.
Dog with oh no!
That came out mere months later than that. So the era that Gravity Falls comes out in, right? Animation is like not a big thing on Disney Channel at all. It's like the live action network, and like Disney's always like favored in TV live action way more than like I felt like Nick, and definitely more than Cartoon Network, especially around this era because Cartoon Network had left the skin real age. There was some live action remnants, but it was mostly animation there.
See, Cartoon Network was never able to break into live action like Nickelodeon did with iCarly, I feel like, and then
I'd say
Disney Channel did with like Lizzie McGuire and Hannah Montana, but Cartoon Network never had like a big live action show that took off.
No, they didn't. The ones that I remember Destroy Built Destroy from Cartoon Network, and I remember like Incredible Crew because it was a sketch show that had Jeremy Shada on it, and that was in my Cartoon Network phase where it was like way more that because for me it roughly went like Nickelodeon was my first big one because in the early 2000s, right, SpongeBob, Fairly Odd Parents, Jimmy Neutron were like a power trio for me, and eventually I watched Avatar when it was all on Netflix and stuff with my dad. But it's like comparing that to how things would evolve, I definitely moved past the other channels and stuff myself. I don't know about you, but yeah.
Yeah, it was God, I'm trying to remember because Gravity Falls really just like took over my brain at the time.
Yeah, no, understandable.
I was watching at the time.
No, I think
I know. Yeah,
I think Disney has always been in this really weird position and stuff where it's like I didn't have as much of a connection to it and stuff and it's honestly it's probably of the three channels, right, the one that I had the least connection to because like Cartoon Network was like very much so in my preteen to early teen phase and stuff, and then like I pretty much phased out of cartoons with the Gravity Falls and Steven Universe. Gravity Falls, Steven Universe, and The Legend of Korra were like my last real big cartoons that I watched before I sort of like stopped watching the kids channels, if that makes sense, and started just watching streaming more so.
yeah. because it's so weird, because I feel like I didn't make this transition over to streaming very naturally.
Right.
It was just my parents stopped paying for cable, and so I was like, okay, I guess I'm not watching cable anymore. But yeah, I remember Disney Channel was a really big deal for me, because when I was a kid, I was like really, really sheltered. And for a really long time, I wasn't allowed to watch anything besides like Dora the Explorer grade television shows.
Right.
So I was watching Nick Jr. up until like I was still watching Dora the Explorer up to like 10 or 11.
Understandable.
Stuff like that. And then by the time I was getting to a point where even my parents were like, it's embarrassing that our kids are still watching baby shows. They were like, well, you can watch Hannah Montana because it has Billy Ray Cyrus in it, and he is a good Christian man. So that means this is a good Christian show.
That's funny.
And then we started watching Hannah Montana, and according to my mother, now, she didn't say anything about it at the time, but she was like, yeah, we gave you guys permission to watch Hannah Montana, and then you actually started watching it, and I almost immediately regretted that decision.
See,
she found the show very obnoxious.
We skipped Hannah Montana because in my household, my brother and I were two boys, and when you're kind of growing up as like two boys, Hannah Montana is not really something that like grabs your interest. My Disney live action shows that I watched, I love Wizards of Waverly Place to pieces. Like that is.
I wasn't allowed to watch that one because wizardry is witchcraft, and witchcraft is Satanism.
That's funny. No, so that was one of the ones for me. Good Luck Charlie was in the era. I watched Ant Farm. I watched Jessie. I watched Austin and Ally. I watched Dog with a Blog. It was that kind of like pack of shows that were kind of like my Disney thing. Because I got, again, into a bit later and stuff within it. Like Nickelodeon, right? iCarly was my era on there. iCarly, Victorious. And then going back to watch like Ned's the Classified and stuff. Also, y'all, if you've been watching this podcast, we go off topic all the time. Welcome to the podcast. It's funny to me, I think. But it's like we go off topic in a fun way, you know, like a quirky way.
You know, it's like this is kind of related.
Yeah,
it is sort of related. This is about the shows that were on at the time. This is about the general, like, what was it like growing up? We're setting the mood of the time period,
you know?
Exactly. We're setting the stage.
Exactly. Because you gotta get into the stage to get into Gravity Falls and, like, get that slice of what the show was like when it was coming out. Because when you really think about it, right, and this is a way that I view media, and I don't know if you analyze it this way too, my fellow film student, but I view movies and, like, pieces of media as products of their era, and, like, you have to analyze how that era really works and put things all together within that. Because once you put it together what an era is and stuff, you can understand the context further about the show. And I think understanding the era of kids media and, like, what they had up then, around then, is pretty essential to realizing what, to realizing how things work within certain things, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Although I find it really interesting because I feel like very uniquely Gravity Falls, it was a unique show at the time. Totally. And it still is. It feels very timeless. I realized this came out between like 2012 and
2016. Yep.
Yeah, it came out in that time period, but it feels like it could have aired last year. It could have aired 5 years before that. Like it could have, even in this episode, I mean, they're using disposable cameras to try and take pictures of the Gobblewonker, and it's like, no, who was using disposable cameras in 2012?
I mean, okay, so part of what I figure that they did, right, is I don't think we ever actually see Dipper and Mabel on the phone. So I think either their parents didn't give them phones, like good parents, and didn't give their 12-year-olds phones, or in the contrary thing, they just took away their phones when they sent them up for the summer. Like, what parents send kids on a bus without a phone? But hey, what parents ship their children off for an entire summer? I don't think that's ever acknowledged how weird that is. Like, it's to a summer camp, sure, but like to the weird uncle that they've never met before.
They do establish that in the pilot episode, though, where they have that little flashback to, like, Mabel's playing with the stuffed animal, and then Dipper was playing on, like, a handheld video game console thing. And then the parents' arms come into frame, and they just, like, snatch it away and then hand them like the backpacks and bus tickets and stuff, and then it's like that's how we got to Gravity Falls.
Right.
And it's very much like I feel like that's very purposeful.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know, maybe it's not. Maybe this is just how it shook out. But like I feel like it's very purposeful to set up that like Gravity Falls is a very unique place. It's a really weird place, and it's not of any distinctive time period. I mean,
it gets
the television that Uncle Stan has in his living room, it's like this old TV. Like it could have come out of the like 70s or 80s or even the 60s. Like it's truly like, Gravity Falls is a very unique place. It's got all this weirdness going on in it, and it's not a part of the modern day. It's not completely divorced from it, but it's also not part of the rest of the world.
Right.
It's its own bubble. And I feel like it was really smart of them to sort of remove that technology and remove, all of these like time period defining things. That, and I think this show was made by people who grew up in the 80s and 90s, and it just shows. I think that's part of it.
Well, like, yeah, no. Okay, so I think we have a segment that we need to get to.
You're always the one to introduce it, and it's my little segment.
I'm sorry.
No, I forget. Why am I forgetting about Sarah's Fun Fact Corner?
Woo!
I wrote down multiple fun facts this time around because there were just too many good ones.
You're feeling a little quirky today, aren't you?
I'm feeling a little extra. I really sat down and I watched the commentary track for this episode, and I said, I'm going to take notes. I'm taking notes, damn it. I'm getting all the Easter eggs. Okay.
You should honestly, we should release it by the end of this, like a Sarah's journal for Gravity Falls of all like little Easter eggs and stuff, and have it like with a hand and 4 or something, like it's the 4th journal, like the guide to Gravity Falls journal from this podcast, like the unofficial guide.
It would be nowhere near as cool as the actual journal, which I don't know if there are any other like mega fans in the audience, but if you have a copy of that first journal that they published, because they published not the first journal, they published the 3rd journal,
right,
the actual 3rd journal from the show, and it's just so brilliant and detailed and incredible, and it's the best $20 you could ever spend.
It's only $20. I should have bought it.
I thought it would. They had like a special edition that was like $500 or something, where it was like genuine, because the one that they have is the normal one that they published is very like thin, right. But the special edition one, I think it had like the glow in the dark, like the black light hidden messages in it, and it was like thick. It was made out of really thick material to look really similar to the the actual journal of the show, which is so like that's what I love about Gravity Falls, and why it probably only lasted 2 seasons, is it's so thorough. Like the fact that they went out of their way to make a special edition journal that had all of these incredible details, all of this incredible attention to detail that was just not necessary. They didn't have to do this. I don't think they even made that much money off of it, because they only made a few hundred copies, but like they went out of their way to do that, because having that genuine replica of the journal, I mean, that's just they're very good about that. The Gravity Falls merch that is out there is almost always just high quality and just so cool. The DVD set, the journal, the soundtrack, the vinyl record soundtrack is incredible. It sold out so quickly, and I was very lucky to get a copy when I did. But
all right.
Yeah. Anyway,
yes,
that's a tangent about merch. Okay, Sarah's Fun Fact Corner. Woo. The fun fact isn't the merch. Okay, so fun fact: Gideon's first appearance is in this episode. Technically, his character is not introduced for another 2 episodes, but in the first scene, when Dipper's holding up his magazine, because there's that photo competition for take a picture of a cryptid and you'll win this, and he's holding up the magazine with that ad in it. And on the cover, you can see there's an ad for Gideon Child Psychic right on them. 2 episodes before he actually gets introduced.
That's
So
amazing.
This episode is the first time you ever see Gideon on screen. Besides, you can see a little Easter egg of him in the intro, in the theme song. But besides that,
Nice.
So that one. Last episode, we talked about production order and how the first episode was the 7th episode that they ever produced, which is wild. This was actually the first episode that they produced. They produced the 2nd episode first.
As one does.
Which makes a lot of sense when you think about it. When you think about how this episode is very, like, it's trying to get a handle on the character dynamics, I feel like, and sort of the style of humor.
Oh, totally.
And you can totally feel this is, like, you know, they're sort of taking their wobbly baby steps. It definitely comes across.
Yeah.
My last fun fact before we get to the fun little trivia question.
Okay.
The disposable cameras that Dipper, Mabel, and Seuss are using to try and catch a picture of the Gobblewonker. The use of those disposable cameras was apparently inspired by Alex Hirsch, the creator of the show, used to carry disposable cameras around with him as a kid because he had a genuine belief in leprechauns. He genuinely, firmly believed that leprechauns were real, and he wanted to catch a picture of one. So he would carry disposable cameras around with him in case he ever saw one. Which I thought was just such a delightful thing to discover. It's so, oh my god. Aww. That's so great. He sounds like such a funny kid.
Yeah. Honestly, I think it's so funny. Well, so you've heard that, like, he based all of Mabel's boyfriends' names on his sister's, like, crushes, right?
I did not know that.
That's one of the funniest things at the show.
That's a Phineas fun fact.
I know. Wow. All right. Trivia question time. And then we're going to have to wrap this episode because we've gone for 46 minutes now.
Oh, gosh. Oh, shoot. Okay. Last one.
Okay.
What major animation error appears throughout this episode?
Do I have options or?
There are no options. I just want to see if you know this.
I don't. Sorry.
The question mark that usually appears on Seuss's shirt is not present throughout this episode. He's just wearing a plain dark green t-shirt for the entire episode. Major animation.
I'm gonna pin that on him wearing the shirt inside out. That feels like something he'd do.
Actually, that's very in character for Seuss.
Absolutely.
That track.
All right. So.
Woo! And that's Sarah's Fun Fact Corner.
Woo!
Thank you for coming.
So, with that said, that goes for the 2nd episode of Awkward Sibling Hug, The Legend of the Gobblewonker.
Oh, wait. Can we do one more thing?
Yes. What's the one more thing?
Our favorite jokes.
Oh.
What's your favorite joke? What's my favorite joke?
Oh my gosh. I love literally everything Stan does this episode.
That's so fair.
But I think the like Schmabel and Schmipper is the funniest one though, honestly. You?
It really is the way that their eyes get so round.
I know.
For me, it's kind of a tie between when Mabel has that pelican and she's like she's moving his beak up and down and she's doing the voice like he's like a marionette puppet. It's so funny.
The pelican joke at the end of the show.
And the pelican joke at the end. Oh, what was it? What was it exactly?
The one in the credits? I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah. I get what you mean,
though. The pelican joke. Why did the pelican get kicked out of the restaurant? Because he had a big bill. Yuck, yuck, yuck. That was...
Yeah.
That was so funny. And here, Christian Shaw is such a good comedic talent and such a good voice actress. And she just does it so well.
And she has like 3 roles where she plays like 3 such different characters with like major things with like between Mabel, Louise on Bob's Burgers, which I don't even watch Bob's Burgers much, but she's so talented. And then also in BoJack Horseman, she's amazing.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like these are all, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like Gravity Falls was sort of Like, she really started to take off right around when she was doing Gravity Falls. I feel like she was in a lot of stuff at the time.
It was definitely this, and then she was also in, like, Last Man on Earth, I think.
Yes! Oh, I love that show! That show is so underrated.
But,
it's so good. I love it.
It's
so funny. It's got such a great cast. And it's so good.
With that said, I think that is the end of our episode today.
I think it is. Can I mention one more joke?
Yes, one more joke.
When they're doing the chase and they're rushing down the lake, and suddenly it all stops, and there's just these two guys in two separate boats, and they're each holding a different end of a giant glass can, and they're just going steady, steady across a lake. They do the glass pane joke on a lake, and then they just smash through in the mirror, and they go ah!
It's perfect.
On a lake. It's such a good bit, and it's so funny to do it during a lake chase.
Dude, there's no show that does comedic, like, random things like that, like Gravity Falls.
It's so fast-paced. It's so fast-paced, and just, like, they just hit you.
And all the jokes work, so it's like, yeah.
They're all so clever.
I know.
Okay.
Alright, ready?
Okay. Yes.
Bye, guys!
Thank you for coming.
Thank y'all. This is a very long second episode, but don't worry, we'll probably get longer by the end of the series. This is just, But yeah. And here we go.
Awkward sibling hug?
Awkward sibling hug. Pat, pat.